Trump is president, and a lot has changed in the world. Tells you how strong America is and how their influence is. So everybody, to some extent, pays a lot of attention to American politics. Canadian also, Canada more so because we are the neighbors to the north of America, of United States. Sorry, and we are one of the biggest. Can I use have one of the biggest trading partnerships in the world? For one, we share the biggest unguarded border between any two countries in the world. So there's a lot in common between Canada and the U.S. Trump now, with his policies, with his style, is putting a wrench in that, particularly with the use of tariffs. A lot of people are for it. A lot of people are against it. A lot of people are indifferent. We'll start like, what is your view about tariffs? I mean, it's not, we haven't heard a lot about it before Trump's presidency. What are your thoughts with Trump bringing it to the limelight?
Again, I think Trump has been in office for almost a month now. He had his inauguration January 20th. It is February 19th, so one day shy of a month, if we look at it that way. So in the course of a month, I think Donald Trump has some sort of turned the world upside down. He has moved completely away from Joe Biden's policy. It sounds like he was bent on moving the United States far away from Biden's policies, and you could see this on every aspect. So you could see this in his talk about what should happen in Gaza. You could see this with his moves in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. You could also see these in American domestic policies, right? With the changes that he's made. So far, I think he's been working or ruling with executive orders. I think that is what he has been kind of riding the waves with the past couple of weeks. And tariffs are one of those things that he has been focused on. I remember that even before he was sworn in, he gave a couple of interviews, and each time he did mention that he was going to put tariffs on, unfortunately, on Canada, who, again, like you rightly said, we are the closest neighbor to the United States. We are probably they are one of our biggest trading partners. I think Canada and the United States sometimes operate as a single country most times, right? So it was quite surprising to see Donald Trump pick on Canada, especially with his tariffs threats. He also did threaten Mexico with tariffs. He also, of course, did put more tariffs on China. I think there was a 10% tariff
10% on China,
Chinese goods, right? In addition to tariffs that were in place during Joe Biden's time. Yeah. So again, I think tariffs are not exactly new. It's not talked about very much. Again, just because I think leaders put tariffs, they don't go around bragging about putting tariffs on goods, because again, there are consequences to that, right? It might impact them negatively politically, right? So they don't make too much noise about. But I think when Donald Trump had his first term, he used tariffs as a means of bargaining, negotiation, because again, he put tariffs on some Canadian goods, steel and aluminum. I remember during Donald Trump's first term, he also did institute tariffs on Chinese goods, a lot of Chinese goods, and also used the threat of tariffs to do the new NAFTA agreement with Canada and Mexico. So Trump has been using tariffs since he was first president during his first term, right? And I think this second term, he has continued to do that. So technically, not really a new thing. Joe Biden did use tariffs as well. I remember him putting tariffs, 100% tariffs on
Electric cars from China.
electric cars from China, right? But again, it wasn't really much talked about because he wasn't making too much noise about it.
No.
Donald Trump is proud of the tool that he has in his toolbox, and I think tariffs are one of them. No matter what you think or feel about tariffs, Donald Trump is using it and he's not shy about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're speaking now. Maybe today is the 19th, so close to 3 weeks since those things were implemented. It was on the
Right.
1st of February, right? So right now they're on suspension. They're doing negotiations. I think there's still is it a 10% tariff on aluminum and steel? That's still in place. But we all saw what happened after that. Canada retaliated, still a 25% tariffs. So it's kind of to back the US on US, Trump said 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, and then Canada retaliated and said 25% on all US goods. So it's been back and forth. But for right now, also having this conversation, it has been suspended. So, but we're just going back to talk about the reactions. What was your view of Canada's reaction? Do you think it was swift? Was it from a position of power? Was it from a position of like strength?
It clearly depends who you talk to. I
Right,
think there are two school of thoughts. Some believe that Canada's approach was one of a subordinate dealing with someone who is more powerful and more
right.
sophisticated than them. Trudeau seemed to have given people this impression. You know, when Trump started, even before his inauguration, Trudeau had made a trip to
Milo,
Mar-a-Lago,
he was the first. He was the first
probably one of the
sitting
first
leader.
to run down there after Trump had
After,
mentioned the tariffs, right?
right,
So it kind of gives you the impression that, okay, well, he is running down there because he needs to start appealing or he needs to start finding ways to appease Trump so that these tariffs don't really take effect. So that is definitely one way of looking at it. We also saw a couple of days ago all the 13
oh,
premiers
the
from the different provinces of Alberta went down to the
as
White
far as
House
Canada, yeah,
of Canada, sorry, went down to the White House to try and negotiate and talk about, how this would impact both the United States and Canada, and so on and so forth, right? So if you talk to some people, yes, they would say, yeah, it's definitely from a position of weakness, and that is the impression that. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau gave by running down to the US to see Trump, and now having this premiers from the 13 provinces
right.
in Canada go down to see him as well, right? Do you think it was from a position of weakness? Are there anything else that you can identify that might indicate a position of weakness, or do you
Yeah,
believe it was
yeah.
a position of strength?
Well, you listed everything. I think Canada is bluffing a lot because Canada doesn't have the amount of strength they think they have on the U.S. market. True, we are the largest trading partner with the United States, but we are still very dependent on the United States, and they take the lead. We have some power, but usually the United States the lead. The United States takes the lead in any relationship that they share with Canada. You know, the tariff is retaliatory. I mean, someone has the power to first of all impose something, then you figure a way to 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 to
To
reply
retaliate.
to
Uh-huh.
retaliate. And also, if you look at what President and Trudeau did, barely days when Trump was had just won the election, so he was still president elect. He hasn't even gone to the White House yet. But Trudeau is a sitting prime minister, so they're making a trip down to the US to meet him at his private residence. So that tells you the power of what a president elect has. Like it or not, Trump is back and he had power even when he was just elected. Okay. Um, the 13 premiers did go to the White House. They didn't even meet with Trump. They didn't even meet with
No.
the chief of staff of his administration. They met with some representatives. I'm not saying these are probably people that are high up there and they'll be make decisions for the United States. But they didn't meet the movers and shakers in the Trump administration. You know, they made and it's not even popular in Canadian news that the premiers went there. Remember all the bluff that were going on TV and saying how they're going to retaliate and stop US from doing business in America. You know, they silently went to the White House. You haven't seen the United States going to Ottawa to meet with the Canadian premier or the Canadian minister. So I think there's a lot of bluff. We clearly know where we stand. We know how we're dependent on the U.S. Uh, so I don't think I think we're overplaying the power of Canada. You know, and then look just to take the two countries. Maybe it's easier to say because the population of Canada is smaller. But look at how the population reacted. You know, everybody was in a frenzy. The media was all over the place. I mean, I think if you go to the US, maybe it's just in the news once in a while. In general, people don't care that much in the US. Like, it doesn't seem to bother them that much. I'm not saying a trade war will not affect them. Of course, it's going to affect the US consumer, but a lot of people are indifferent in the US. They're like, Canada, like, what's happening in Canada? Who's Canada? You know what I mean? So I think Canada is definitely playing a long hand. I think we need to recalibrate our position and know. And for me, knowing your position is a form of strength. Stop trying to play Goliath when you're actually David. You know, when you know that you're David, it's better to strategize from a David point of view than thinking that you can play long hand.
For those who call Trump a bully, they would say, that is how you deal with a bully, right? If you're being bullied, you need to rise up and stand up for yourself, right? And I think that's what Canada has been trying to do. They see Trump as a disruptor, they see him as a bully, and they get the impression that if they do nothing or if they try diplomacy, Trump is not one. Trump is not one who is influenced or moved by diplomacy, right? They say all the time that Trump respects strength, and I think this is what Trudeau was trying to do. He trying to do tit for tat thing. I read.
Just look at just hear Trudeau. Does his voice sound like he's commanding some power and strength? The guy first of all sound like a lady. Like he doesn't even show strength or power or some force, for Elias to a certain extent, maybe I'm biased here, but he shows a certain level of strength. But Trudeau, come on, have you even seen the guy run? He doesn't command the same level of respect that the U.S. president commands. I'm sorry to say.
Not exactly. He doesn't. I agree, but again, it's not. I mean, I'm one I'm one who wants to see strength.
Strength from Canada, right?
Yeah. Strength from Canada in that way. But again, if you look at some of the things that he did, Canada imposing 155 billion in counter tariffs against the U.S. The Canadian government. Canadian government has pledged to hit the U.S. with retaliatory 25% tariff for all goods or some goods coming into Canada. I mean, that is something, right? That is definitely something.
That's something. That's something.
You could definitely argue that maybe, again, this is me speculating. You could definitely speculate that if Canada did not put in place these retaliatory measures, again, not just the retaliatory measures, because they also had a couple of things that they had put in place which we would definitely bring up. But again, I think that 155 billion in tariffs is a lot of money, and it would go a long way impacting businesses in the United States, right? So definitely claim that or assume that the decision to suspend or to put a hold on these tariffs were as a result of some of the things that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did, right? There's also, he also agreed that he was going to spend, because again, I think Trump's primary reason, not the only reason, but one of his primary reasons for wanting to put tariffs on Canada and Mexico has to deal with the border, right? He claims that the borders are porous, and we have all these illegal immigrants, all these drug criminals.
A lot of them from Canada too, he says.
Say some of them are from Canada. I don't know how many of them are from Canada. I don't think Canada opens up immigration into the US that
Not
much. But
nearly
again,
as the south of
that
the US.
is
Yeah.
his claim, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
we are letting fentanyl, which is a big deal for him. He is
Hmm.
way you know that he's anti-drug. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to have these drugs flow into the US. So he said, well, you guys need to do something with your border. And again, Trudeau kind of went into action. Canada implementing a 1.3 billion dollar border plan to include nearly 100,000 frontline workers. 100,000 frontline workers. So you see that whatever Trump did has impact.
It has impact.
It has
So
impact for Canada
yeah.
to say, "Oh no, we are going to put 10,000 more, 10,000
So
more
they made Trump's demands.
to
He goes
deal
like,
with the border." Tells
yeah,
you that Trump had good reason, right? And this is
yeah,
Canada bending the knee and saying, okay, we are going to take action on some of these things. Another thing which I know is that really Canada doesn't make a whole lot of high tech equipment, surveillance, and all that. So some of this money, or a lot of this money, is going to be spent on companies in the USA. So some
yeah.
of this money is going to go to them, right? Because they're going to acquire surveillance cameras,
Contracts.
drones,
Yeah,
which I don't think that Canada makes a lot of those, right? So again, you're spending money in the US and helping with that balance of trade argument that Trump has been putting in place. Another thing too is appointing someone to head. They say the fentanyl czar, right? This is
bizarre.
one who's going to deal with specific, that his role is to address the fentanyl issues in the border and do that with Canada. These are big moves. And
Those are
again,
big moves.
I would argue that none of these moves would have been made without the threats that Donald Trump put in place. So again,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's win. It's another
Okay.
win for Donald Trump, right? He's
All
getting
right,
things
all
done.
right.
And again, if you
Let's
go
get
down to
anything down.
Mexico, again, it was the same.
In
The
Mexico,
Mexican,
Mexico reacted in like one day. They're like, okay,
yes,
we're gonna add. We're gonna add 10,000 more troops. Like, where have these people been in the last 3 months? Where was Biden? Like it took Mexico like one day to meet Trump's demands. You
yes.
know, and I forgive me, but a lot of Canadians, I think, are going around giving Justin to do a victory lap. I don't know if that's really a victory lap. The guy basically caved into all of Trump's demands. He basically said he's going to work with Trump to stop the fentanyl. You've already said that. He's going to put how many thousand, about 10,000 more troops on the border. They're going to have a joint commission to be able to study the trade, whatever. For me, he basically accepted all of Trump's points. Then you go in front of the camera and say Canada has strength and force and whatever. I don't see that like a victory lap.
I
You
would say
basically caved
I
in.
would say they are all winners. Trump won because he
Yeah,
got
right.
things done. Canada won too, to a certain extent, because again, these tariffs
Yes,
have been suspended for 30 days, right?
for 30
And
days.
with the
Yeah,
work that they've done so far, I'm assuming that is either going to be extended for another 30 days, or he might just,
right. It might
you know,
just. I mean, Trump has
just
already
abandon.
yeah, he's already softened his tone. He's like, okay, we're gonna tariff countries the same amount that they tariff us. I don't know if he's like trying to prepare his mind for the end of the 1 month that they gave for
Mhm.
negotiations. That is very possible. So it's a win-win. But if you watch Canadian news, second, you almost have the feel like Canada just trumped over the US, over Trump, and this disgrace Trump. But I'm like, the guy basically caved into all of Trump's demands. So I mean, you can say that's a victory, yeah, but don't announce it as if you trampled on Trump. Like he basically made his demands. Um,
When you
um,
met it,
and I'm saying, yeah, and I said it with all respect for Canada, and I'm a Canadian too, but we just don't command the same force that the US does. It's the sad reality. We don't have the population, we don't have the military capability, we don't have the market, we don't
Mhm.
have the world influence like them. So I think it's a mistake for us to overplay our power. you know it's important for us to know our strength, where we can work together, where we have power and maintain that. But trying to think that we can go toe for toe with them, I think it's a little bit overplaying our strength here.
Yeah, it's impossible to go toe for toe. If you look at the size of Canada, our economy, so Canada's economy compared to the size of
Compared, yeah.
the
I was
economy of
reading
the
somewhere, and
US.
I don't know if it's true. If they put the GDP of Canada, it's not even the fifth state of the US. If they put everything GDP wise,
Mhm,
but I don't know
mhm.
if that's true. But I read that somewhere, but might be some biased news
Yeah,
source.
I mean, 33 million people. What do we make if you take away crude oil, which is
Crude
our
oil and
crude
maple
oil,
syrup.
natural gas, and
And you know what's funny? The last administration, in collaboration with Trudeau, they are trying to kill the Keystone Pipeline, which is what is Canada's main export.
But again, true. And again, you have your main export crude oil. You need pipelines, and again, this is definitely a tricky process dealing with pipelines again, because they are, you go through First Nations territories. You have to respect
Can you
that.
imagine?
There,
I
there
think we should
are
talk on that too.
environmental
Yeah,
there are environmental factors that have to be respected.
yeah,
And again,
yeah.
in a democracy like Canada, there's a process. You have,
Can you imagine the bureaucracy?
each project has to go through that process, have to meet certain standards, quality control,
Yeah.
environmental factors, things like that. While in some other parts of the world, the government, the central government or the federal government has powers over how
Yeah,
federal projects are executed, right? So, you want to take a Keystone pipeline down to the US, there is resistance, because you say you want to put a
this
pipeline
resistance.
towards the east, the Quebec, the Quebec, Quebec
They
won't let
have
you do that.
they won't let you do it, which is weird. Alberta is biggest contributor to the Canadian economy. But Quebec, it's limiting Alberta from exporting its resources, which is where it gets the money to be able to contribute for the federal reserves that Quebec benefits a lot too from. So I think one thing that this trade war has highlighted is the poor interprovincial trade that Canada had and that Canada has, and Pierre Bolev has highlighted that. But remember the one time there was retaliation between Alberta and BC. Same for the
Mhm,
Keystone Pipeline, and
mhm.
Alberta didn't want to import wine from BC. You know, because some climate zealots feel that they have the power to stop a pipeline running through their territory. So another province can effectively stop Canada or Alberta in particular from exporting its main resource to the outside market world. And that just means letting a pipeline pass through your territory. So in many cases,
And again,
Alberta has
not saying, not minimizing the risk, because again, I
not
definitely do
minimizing the risk,
agree
of course,
that
of course.
there are
There is
environmental
significant risk.
risks.
Yeah,
There are
yeah,
significant environmental risk.
yeah,
There's leak oil leaks, there's fires, there's accidents. Not
yeah.
minimizing that, right? But
Right.
at a certain point, you have to
Where does the
weigh.
Canada identity trump the provincial identity? When do we come and say we are Canada? We are one people. We are supposed to be united for the common good of our country. It's like the fight between brother and sister trumps the family name. And then we are more concerned about this brother fighting the other brother rather than supporting the family name of Canada. That's one thing I admire in Americans, which I think Canada needs to adopt that Canadian identity. What is it
I
that
don't
unites us together?
I don't think Canada has, Canada has a long history of struggles. And I think federalism was definitely a result of that. These
Yeah,
independent individual provinces realized that being independent on their own was not going to get them anywhere. So what did they
right.
decided to come together and
Confederate.
form a federation, right? A confederation. But I think since then we haven't really had any real test to what that unity
National unity.
might look
Yeah,
like, right? And I feel like the tariffs, the relationship between Canada and the US
has
now has
exposed
given
that.
this people a little bit of a push to come together as a country, as opposed to as independent or separate
Yeah,
entities, right? Because
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
once you're united, you have strength in numbers, you have
Yeah, yeah.
leverage to a certain extent,
Mhm,
and you can
mhm.
use that to as a bargain as a
As a
bargaining
bargaining team, yeah.
chip for
But yeah, yeah.
transactions
To reiterate the
with the
point,
US.
I think, yeah, I think that national identity, that national pride as Canadians, as Canada, as having a common goal, yeah, we need to develop that strongly. I would like to see Canada come in and say we are one nation. We have a focus. We want to make our country great. That means making ways for business to thrive, even if we don't agree with them environmentally. Like, what are the things that we can do to make it more safe so we don't have the risks of environmental damage should we pass the oil pipeline? And we're saying that maybe because we are Albertans and we're a little bit biased, but then and we know how much Alberta contributes to Canada. And just a few years ago, there was some movement that was starting to build up. They kind of lost its traction. The Wexit, so kind of like the Brexit, but for Alberta. You know what I mean?
Some
But
some
the
people argue
Wexit,
that Alberta would not mind being the 51st state of the
Alberta will
United
not
States.
mind
Alberta would
actually. Yeah,
probably
because
not mind. If you talk to a good number of Albertans, they might be okay with that suggestion, right? But again, the rest of Canada probably not.
no, no, no,
And
no.
again, I think a key reason why we have Alberta has a close relationship with the US is because
What it is?
I mean, they are our biggest buyer of crude oil.
Of
I
course,
think they
oil.
buy about 75% or more
They do.
of the
Yeah,
crude oil that Alberta produces, right? So we definitely have an interest in keeping a good relationship
we
with
don't
the
have an
US.
interest. Yeah,
Definitely
an
have an
interest
interest.
that Quebec doesn't share, an interest that BC doesn't really share, because BC
Mhm.
they produce a lot of wine, and you can't compare with California in producing wine. You know, you can Quebec. I'm not sure what they produce. Hydroelectricity. I know they supply the US with electricity in Quebec and Ontario. Sure, that's a good thing, but yeah, it's not a natural resource. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's something that if the US wants to invest in, they can invest. Not to say that a trade war will not affect you, it would, but I mean, oil is a natural resource. You must be blessed to find it under your soil. So, Alberta has an important say in Canada elections, but if you have other province fighting you to export what is naturally yours because they have some people who are environmental idealists and they think they cannot, they'll rather import oil from foreign land than to allow you. I think it's a big problem. And I think Canada has to find a way to work together with other provinces and develop that national identity and
Mhm.
forge ahead as a common nation. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be difficult. That way Trump cannot manipulate Canada. So I mean, you must have very limited knowledge of Canada to call Canada the 51 state. Land wise, Canada is bigger than the US. You know, population wise, or obviously 1/10. But that just tells you what American thinks of Canada. Yeah, Americans think of Canada like, well, there's some people up there in the north in some cold place surrounded by coral of forest. Like, they're not really talking something serious that we should care about. Like, the average American is indifferent to what Canadians think. They don't care. But American politics is very popular in Canada. Like, we are following almost the same or more than the prime minister election that's coming up
I think American politics is popular everywhere in the world. I
everywhere in
remember
the world.
when I visited Cameroon a couple of it was it two
People are
three
talking
years ago.
about it.
Every household has CNN on it. There's
Yeah,
CNN, there's BBC,
there's
but it's
BBC.
mostly CNN.
It's mostly
So
CNN.
each house you get in, they are listening to listening to news, and it's mostly news from the US.